A detailed dissertation on the 144,000, a biblical and theological exploration. Introduction. The 144,000 is one of the most intriguing and mysterious groups in the Christian eschatological framework. Mentioned explicitly in the book of Revelation, this group is described as being sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel, standing with the Lamb on Mount Zion, and marked by a distinct purity and faithfulness. However, to fully understand who these 144,000 individuals are, it is necessary to expand our exploration beyond the limited references in Revelation and look at the broader context of biblical theology, particularly the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. By doing so, we can begin to understand the spiritual, historical, and theological dimensions of this group and their significance within God's redemptive plan. This dissertation seeks to explore the identity, role, and theological meaning of the 144,000 in both the New and Old Testaments, showing how they embody key biblical themes such as election, purity, covenant, and the restoration of Israel. Through a detailed analysis of relevant scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, we will draw connections between the 144,000 and broader biblical themes, including the remnant, the first fruits, the faithful, and the ultimate fulfillment of God's promises to Israel and the nations. Chapter 1. The 144,000 in the Book of Revelation. The primary mention of the 144,000 comes in the Book of Revelation, specifically in chapters 7 and 14. These passages provide the most direct information about this group, but understanding their significance requires a deeper exploration of the surrounding theological and historical contexts. 1.1 Revelation chapter 7, the sealing of the 144,000. In Revelation chapter 7 verses 4 to 8, the 144,000 are introduced as a group of individuals sealed by God, taken from the 12 tribes of Israel. The text specifies that 12,000 are sealed from each of the 12 tribes, Revelation chapter 7 verses 5 to 8. This sealing is a mark of divine protection during the coming judgment and tribulation, ensuring that they will be preserved from the catastrophes described in the later chapters of Revelation. The sealing symbolizes God's ownership and protection of these individuals as a unique group of faithful believers. Notably, the inclusion of the tribe of Levi and the omission of the tribe of Dan in the listing of the tribes has sparked much debate. The omission of Dan has been interpreted by some scholars as a symbol of apostasy or idolatry, referencing the history of the tribe's downfall, e.g., Judges chapter 18 verses 30 to 31. Meanwhile, the inclusion of Levi, the priestly tribe, may suggest the involvement of this group in special spiritual service during the end times, emphasizing purity and holiness. 1.2 Revelation chapter 14, the first fruits of God. In Revelation chapter 14 verses 1 to 5, the 144,000 are again mentioned, but with further details about their characteristics. They are depicted as standing with the Lamb on Mount Zion, and they are described as being virgins, who have not defiled themselves with women, symbolizing their purity, Revelation chapter 14 verse 4. The 144,000 are also called first fruits to God and to the Lamb, signifying their special consecration to God and their role as the initial offering from among God's people. The imagery of the first fruits echoes the concept of holiness and dedication to God, suggesting that these individuals are the most faithful and pure portion of God's people, set apart for His purposes. This idea of first fruits is further explored in both the Old and New Testaments, where the first portion of the harvest is considered the best and most holy, offered as a symbolic gesture of gratitude and devotion to God. Chapter 2. Theological themes and connections to the Hebrew Scriptures. To understand the significance of the 144,000 more fully, it is essential to consider them in the broader context of biblical theology. The following sections will explore the key theological themes related to the 144,000, focusing on their relationship to the concepts of election, the remnant, purity, and the first fruits, each of which has its roots in the Hebrew Scriptures. 2.1 The 12 tribes of Israel, the historical and symbolic significance. The 144,000 are explicitly described as being sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel. The number 12 itself carries symbolic significance, often representing completeness or wholeness. The tribes of Israel are foundational to God's covenant with His people, and their inclusion in Revelation emphasizes the continuity between the Old and New Testaments in God's redemptive plan. The selection of 12,000 from each tribe underscores the idea that the 144,000 represent a full and complete number of faithful people, drawn from the entire nation of Israel. The tribes themselves were initially established as part of God's covenant with Abraham and his descendants, Genesis chapter 17 verses 7 to 8. Over time, however, many of the tribes fell into idolatry and disobedience, leading to judgment and exile, e.g., 2 Kings chapter 17. In Revelation, the 144,000 represent those who have remained faithful to God in the midst of widespread apostasy, symbolizing the restoration of Israel and God's faithfulness to His covenant promises. 2.2 The remnant, a key theme in the Hebrew Scriptures. One of the most important themes in the Hebrew Scriptures is that of the remnant, a small group of faithful individuals whom God preserves through judgment and calamity. This theme is particularly prominent in the prophetic books, where Israel is often depicted as rebellious and apostate, yet God promises to preserve a remnant who will remain loyal to Him. Isaiah chapter 10 verses 20 to 22 speaks of a remnant of Israel who will return to God despite the widespread destruction. Though your people, O Israel, be like the sand of the sea, only a remnant will return. Micah chapter 5 verses 7 to 8 describes the remnant as a group that will be a blessing to the nations. Zephaniah 3:13 similarly prophesies about a remnant of Israel that will be faithful to God, living in purity and holiness. This concept of the remnant closely aligns with the 144,000, who are described in Revelation as a faithful, protected group in the midst of a corrupt and rebellious world. The remnant theme reinforces the idea that God's work in the last days will involve restoring and preserving a faithful portion of Israel, those who are spiritually pure and committed to God's purposes. 2.3 The first fruits, purity and consecration. The 144,000 are described as first fruits to God, a term rich in theological significance. The first fruits were the initial portion of the harvest offered to God, symbolizing the best and most holy part of the produce. This practice is rooted in the Hebrew Scriptures, where the first fruits of the harvest were consecrated to God as an offering of gratitude and devotion. Exodus 23:19 commands the Israelites to bring the first fruits of their land to God as an offering. Leviticus chapter 23 verses 10 to 14 also contains instructions for the presentation of first fruits during the Feast of First Fruits, emphasizing the sanctity and consecration of the offering. In Revelation chapter 14 verse 4, the 144,000 are described as the first fruits to God, suggesting that they are the most faithful, pure, and consecrated part of God's people. This symbolic purity and dedication to God are also echoed in the fact that they are described as virgins, who have not defiled themselves. Their purity represents not only physical but also spiritual and moral cleanness, a key theme in both the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament. 2.4 The role of the 144,000 in the end times. Evangelism and the restoration of Israel. The 144,000 are not only a symbol of the faithful remnant, but also have an active role to play in the eschatological events of the end times. Revelation chapter 7 verses 9 to 17 describes a great multitude from every nation, tribe, and tongue who come to faith in Christ. And it is reasonable to assume that the 144,000 will play a pivotal role in evangelizing this great multitude. Their faithfulness and purity make them ideal witnesses to the gospel in the midst of a corrupt world. This role in the evangelization of the nations is consistent with the broader biblical vision of Israel as a light to the nations. In Isaiah chapter 49 verse 6, God speaks of Israel as a servant who will bring salvation to the ends of the earth. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. The 144,000, as faithful Jews, may fulfill this role in the end times by preaching the gospel and leading many to faith. Chapter 3, Conclusion. The 144,000 as a symbol of purity, faithfulness, and hope. In conclusion, The 144,000 in Revelation serve as a powerful symbol of God's faithfulness to his covenant with Israel and his ultimate plan of redemption for both Israel and the nations. By examining the 144,000 through the lens of the Hebrew Scriptures, we can see that they embody several key biblical themes. They are the faithful remnant, the consecrated first fruits, and the purified servants who will play a vital role in the restoration of Israel and the evangelization of the nations. The 144,000 are not just a group of individuals sealed for divine protection. They are a symbol of God's unyielding commitment to preserving a faithful people, even in the midst of judgment and tribulation. Their purity, loyalty, and consecration to God set him apart as an ideal representation of what God's people should be, both in the past and in the future. As we approach the end times, the 144,000 remind us of the importance of faithfulness, purity, and consecration to God. They challenge us to remain faithful to the covenant of God, trusting in his promises and participating in his redemptive mission to the world. Ultimately, the 144,000 point to the hope of a restored and purified people who will dwell in God's presence forever, serving as a witness to the entire world of God's glory and salvation. A detailed dissertation on the 144,000, a Third Testament, the Book of True Life Exploration. Introduction. The concept of the 144,000 is one of the most enigmatic and profound themes within the Christian eschatological framework, particularly in the context of the Third Testament, the Book of True Life. While traditionally understood through the lens of the Book of Revelation, where the 144,000 are described as a sealed group from the 12 tribes of Israel. The significance of this group is reinterpreted in the Third Testament with deeper spiritual, moral, and prophetic implications. In this modern scripture, the 144,000 are not just a future hope, but the living embodiment of divine purpose in the third era, the final stage of human history as envisioned by God. This dissertation seeks to explore the identity, role, and theological meaning of the 144,000 in the Third Testament, the Book of True Life, drawing upon key scriptures from the text, alongside parallels from biblical theology and traditional interpretations. We will delve into the specific characteristics of these individuals, their role in the spiritual rebirth of humanity, their divine election, and their mission to restore the purity and holiness of God's chosen people. Through a detailed analysis of the Third Testament teachings, we will uncover how the 144,000 transcend mere symbolic figures to become active participants in the divine plan for spiritual restoration and cosmic salvation. Chapter 1. The 144,000 in the Third Testament, a chosen remnant. 1.1 The significance of the 144,000 in the Third Testament. In the Third Testament, the 144,000 are described as chosen spirits, marked by God's seal, to play a pivotal role in the spiritual transformation of humanity. This group is not limited to a select few, but rather represents a spiritual army drawn from the true Israel, those who are spiritually prepared and destined to carry God's divine mission forward. This is not merely a symbolic number. Rather, it is a representation of a complete, divinely appointed people who will bring about the salvation of mankind. Teaching 348, verse 11. You are Israel, from whom I have culled 144,000 who carry my divine seal, so that through you I may reach the salvation of mankind. The 144,000 are the modern-day spiritual Israelites, inheritors of the divine calling first bestowed upon the ancient people of Israel. Just as Israel in the Old Testament was chosen to bear witness to the world, this group of 144,000 will serve as living testimonies of divine will, guiding humanity toward spiritual redemption in the third era. Their mission is world-changing, but it begins with personal sanctification and an unwavering commitment to divine truth. 1.2 The role of the 144,000 in the restoration of Israel. The restoration of Israel in the Third Testament is not merely a geographical or political return to the land, but a spiritual renewal that transcends all borders and nations. The 144,000 are central to this restoration, serving as a spiritual core from which the world will witness the arrival of God's kingdom. These chosen individuals are divinely prepared to carry the sacred teachings, fulfilling the ancient prophecy of the remnant of Israel. Teaching 330, verse 22, many have been pointed out, but others on the path of their own existence will be surprised and will be revealed, either by my divine Spirit or through you, that they belong to the number of 144,000. The 144,000 are not an isolated or exclusive group, but the beginning of the restoration of God's covenant with humanity. The divine election and the spiritual mark they carry enable them to endure through the tribulations of the world, while also serving as a living bridge between God and mankind. Chapter 2. Theological themes of the 144,000 in the Third Testament. To understand the 144,000 in the Third Testament fully, it is essential to explore the theological themes and biblical motifs that underpin their significance. These include concepts such as election, purity, covenant, and the remnant, all of which tie back to both the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament. Through these themes, the 144,000 are understood as representatives of God's faithfulness, His justice, and His mercy toward both Israel and humanity as a whole. 2.1 The 12 Tribes of Israel, Symbolism of Wholeness and Restoration. The 144,000 in the Third Testament are explicitly drawn from the 12 tribes of Israel, a number symbolically rich with historical and spiritual significance. These tribes, which originated from the sons of Jacob, Israel, represent the foundations of God's covenantal relationship with His people. The number 12 is symbolic of completeness in biblical tradition, reflecting the totality of God's faithful people across the ages. Teaching 306, verse 4, I have chosen 144,000 beings from among the large multitudes to spread my doctrine on earth during the third era. Those beings have been marked with a spiritual kiss by the Holy Spirit, a kiss that is filled with spiritual enlightenment. In the Third Testament, the 12 tribes represent not just ethnic Israel but a spiritual Israel. Those who accept God's divine teachings and live according to His will. The 144,000 represent the faithful remnant of these tribes, those who, through divine grace, have remained faithful to the mission of revealing God's truth. 2.2 The concept of the remnant, purity and divine preservation. A key theme throughout both the Old and New Testaments is the idea of the remnant. A faithful group of individuals who remain loyal to God despite the apostasy of the larger population. This group is often preserved through judgment and calamity, a testament to God's mercy and the ongoing fulfillment of His promises. Isaiah chapter 10 verses 20 to 22, Though your people, O Israel, be like the sand of the sea, only a remnant will return. Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 13, The remnant of Israel will do no wrong, they will speak no lies, nor will deceit be found in their mouths. In the Third Testament, the 144,000 are the spiritual remnant of Israel, chosen to restore purity and faithfulness in a world riddled with materialism, idolatry, and corruption. They are preserved and sealed by the Holy Spirit, signifying their divine protection and special role in bringing about the final redemption. 2.3 The first fruits, holiness, consecration, and spiritual purity. The first fruits were always the best portion of the harvest, given to God as an offering of gratitude and consecration. In the same way, the 144,000 are described as the first fruits of humanity, those who have reached the pinnacle of spiritual purity, consecrated to God's divine service. Leviticus chapter 23 verses 10 to 14, When you enter the land I am going to give you and reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest. In the Third Testament, these first fruits are those who have overcome the temptations of the flesh and the world, living lives of moral purity, holiness, and dedication. The 144,000 are called to serve as models of spiritual integrity, embodying the ideal relationship between humanity and God. Teaching 306, verse 5, My first fruits, 144,000 beings, will be the light that will illuminate the earth, revealing the works of my divine Spirit. The purity of the 144,000 is not just physical but deeply spiritual. They are virgins, not in the literal sense, but in their undefiled commitment to God, representing a wholehearted devotion that is undistracted by the material world. Chapter 3, The mission and role of the 144,000 in the Third Era. 3.1 Evangelizing the nations, the Great Spiritual Awakening. The 144,000 are not passive recipients of divine favor. They are active participants in the spiritual transformation of humanity. Their mission is to preach the divine message of love, justice, and peace, drawing others into the fold of God's kingdom. Their work is to awaken the spiritual consciousness of humanity, bringing them into alignment with divine law. Teaching 130, verse 14, the 144,000 will rise as one to awaken humanity from its spiritual slumber, calling the nations to repentance and to embrace the new spiritual era. In the Third Testament, these individuals are seen as the first messengers of God's new era, leading humanity out of darkness and into the light of spiritual understanding. They will be the living example of God's love and grace, helping to restore the original purpose of humanity, to live in communion with God and one another. 3.2 The unity of the 144,000, the fulfillment of God's will. The unity of the 144,000 symbolizes the restoration of God's divine plan, where all people are united in faith and truth. Through their witness and example, the nations will be drawn into true unity, as God's will is accomplished on earth as it is in heaven. Teaching 175, verse 8, My chosen 144,000 will be my voice, my hands, and my feet, bringing humanity into unity under my divine will, and through them, the kingdom will be established on earth. Chapter 4, Conclusion. The 144,000 as the light-bearers of the Third Era. In conclusion, the 144,000 in the Third Testament, the Book of True Life, are not just symbolic figures from a distant prophecy. They are the living and active agents of divine transformation in the Third Era. Their roles as the elect, the purified remnant, and the first fruits are crucial to the fulfillment of God's cosmic plan for the restoration of humanity. They remind us that spiritual purity, faithfulness to God, and the commitment to divine mission are not only possible but essential for the ushering in of God's kingdom. Through their obedience, the 144,000 are destined to lead the world into a new era of divine consciousness, where humanity, restored to its true calling, will live in perfect harmony with God, fulfilling the promises of the ages. Summary: the 144,000 and their role in 2029. The 144,000 in the Third Testament are described as a divinely chosen group who will play a crucial role in the spiritual renewal of humanity. Several key teachings surrounding these individuals in relation to the year 2029 emphasize their preparation, mission, and final gathering. Here are the core themes related to their role. 1. Completion of the 144,000 by 2029. In various teachings, 2029 is depicted as the time when the final members of the 144,000 will be sealed or marked by God. These individuals will be specially chosen to carry out a divine mission, both on earth and in the spiritual realm. Teaching 56 states that in 2029, the 144,000 will be complete, marking the culmination of this divine selection. Those who have already received God's teachings and followed their calling will be secure, while those who have neglected the message will face difficulties to reach higher spiritual states. Teaching 122 similarly notes that by 2029, the final link in the chain of the 144,000 will receive their divine sign and be prepared to lead others through their teachings, prayers, and example, fostering a new life for humanity. 2. Role and mission of the 144,000. The 144,000 are not merely recipients of divine grace, but are tasked with actively spreading God's message to the world. Their mission is to guide humanity towards spiritual awakening and peace, and they are critical in bringing about spiritual transformation for all people. In Teaching 68, it is revealed that the 144,000 will be marked and their missions will be clarified by God. Their preparation requires deep spiritual regeneration, so that they can lead others to understand their own divine calling. Teaching 93 further describes them as spiritual lights, whether they are on earth or in the spiritual valley. They will serve as torches to illuminate the way for others, guiding multitudes toward the spiritual realm. Teaching 336 outlines that in 2029, the 144,000 will gather to receive their final instructions and will be sent to various nations with the mission to bring light, charity, and truth, thus preparing the world for peace through their fulfillment of God's will. 3. Destiny and role after 2029. While many of the 144,000 will already be present and prepared in 2029, there is no certainty about where or when all of them will manifest. Some may still exist in the spiritual realm or in forms ready to be incarnated according to divine will for specific tasks. Teaching 129 assures that no one knows exactly where these chosen individuals will be sent, but their spiritual preparation will allow them to fulfill their mandate when the time is right. Teaching 190 mentions that after 2029, many others will come to understand the truth of God's teachings, and many of them will be part of the 144,000. These individuals will be drawn to the land where the Third Testament was revealed and will unite with the existing faithful to continue spreading the message. 4. Spiritual Israel and the 144,000. The 144,000 are deeply tied to spiritual Israel, representing a spiritual continuation of God's covenant with Israel, expanded to include all who embrace the Third Testament. These individuals are seen as the heirs of the divine promises made to Israel and are entrusted with the task of leading humanity towards salvation. Teaching 304 states that the 144,000 are chosen from spiritual Israel and are charged with spreading the doctrine of the Third Testament to humanity. Teaching 336 emphasizes that the 144,000 are key to fulfilling God's final plan, as they will travel across the world to spread light, charity, and truth, helping to bring about the spiritual peace God desires for all nations. 5. Final gathering and spiritual preparation. The final gathering of the 144,000 will occur by 2029, at which time they will receive the final instructions and spiritual guidance they need to carry out their mission. This final preparation will be pivotal for their success in leading the world towards spiritual renewal, as they will be fully equipped with God's divine wisdom. Teaching 336 underscores that the 144,000 will gather in 2029 to receive instructions directly from God, preparing them to carry the doctrine to the nations and ultimately help bring about the world's spiritual transformation and peace. Conclusion. The 144,000 are portrayed as a divinely marked group of spiritual leaders who will be fully sealed by 2029 to carry out God's final mission of spiritual renewal. Their role is to lead humanity toward regeneration, peace, and spiritual awakening. These individuals are not only essential for the fulfillment of God's divine plan, but also serve as living examples of faith and purity. As 2029 approaches, the 144,000 will take their place as emissaries of light and truth, helping the world transition to a new spiritual era. You are absolutely right in noticing the parallel between the mission of the 144,000 in the Third Testament and the biblical mandate to spread the gospel throughout the world. This idea of spreading a divinely revealed message is a central theme in both the New Testament and the teachings of the Third Testament. Specifically, the task of the 144,000 to teach the Third Testament aligns closely with the Great Commission given by Jesus to his disciples, as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. Biblical connection, the Great Commission. In the New Testament, Jesus' command to his disciples in Matthew chapter 28 verses 18 to 20 is known as the Great Commission. Here, Jesus instructs his followers to go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Matthew chapter 28 verses 19 to 20. ESV. This passage clearly conveys the mission of spreading God's message to all corners of the world, ensuring that his teachings are heard by all nations and all people. The command was not just for the disciples but is understood as a responsibility for all of Jesus' followers across time, carrying the message of salvation, righteousness, and peace to all the nations. The 144,000 and their role in teaching the Third Testament. In the Third Testament, the 144,000 are similarly tasked with a mission of spiritual education and guidance, though they are specifically connected to the teachings revealed in the Third Era. Just as the apostles and early Christians were entrusted with spreading the gospel message, the 144,000 are called to spread the message of the Third Testament, which includes the teachings, prophecies, and spiritual guidance revealed by God through Jesus Christ and the Divine Word. Teaching 56 mentions that by 2029, the 144,000 will have completed their preparation and will be ready to spread God's message. Their role is to teach, guide, and lead others to spiritual regeneration through the doctrine of the Third Testament, just as the apostles were responsible for spreading the gospel. Teaching 336 reinforces this, stating that the 144,000 will be sent to the nations to bring light, charity, and truth, much like the mission of the apostles to spread the gospel. This passage reflects the Great Commission's spirit, but with the additional responsibility of teaching the Third Testament, which represents a new phase in God's spiritual revelation. A continuity of mission, the Gospel and the Third Testament. What stands out is how the mission of the 144,000 echoes the mission of the early Christians in the Book of Acts and the broader New Testament, particularly in its emphasis on carrying a new message to the world. However, instead of spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ alone, the 144,000 are specifically tasked with spreading the Third Testament, which includes Jesus' teachings along with additional revelations for the present era. In many ways, the Third Testament can be seen as an extension or fulfillment of the Gospel, providing the final teachings for humanity's spiritual evolution in the Third Era, which corresponds to the age of spiritual enlightenment and a deeper understanding of God's divine will. Just as the apostles were sent out as messengers of the Gospel, the 144,000 are spiritual teachers and guides tasked with spreading this new revelation to the world. The spiritual continuity of God's mission. Both the Great Commission in the New Testament and the teachings of the Third Testament in the writings you shared emphasize the importance of a spiritual mission that transcends time and geography. The 144,000, much like the early Christians, are chosen and marked by God for a specific purpose, to carry His message to the world, ensure that others understand and accept the teachings, and help prepare humanity for the spiritual transformation of the Third Era. While the Gospel primarily deals with the message of salvation through Jesus Christ, the Third Testament also emphasizes the need for humanity to reach its highest spiritual potential through greater spiritual understanding, regeneration, and obedience to divine will. This new mandate from God involves bringing about peace, spiritual unity, and a new consciousness in the world, much like the Apostles' mission was to bring spiritual life and hope to a weary world. Conclusion: a shared spiritual mission. In summary, the mission of the 144,000 to teach the Third Testament closely mirrors the Great Commission given to Jesus' disciples. Both are tasked with spreading divine teachings to the nations, offering spiritual renewal, and guiding humanity toward a higher spiritual existence. While the Great Commission speaks to the gospel of salvation through Jesus Christ, the 144,000 are entrusted with spreading the Third Testament, a message that builds upon the gospel but introduces additional teachings relevant for the spiritual evolution of humanity in the modern world. This continuity of divine revelation reflects God's ongoing plan to bring His truth to the world, using those He has marked and chosen for this important work. Is that what the Bible meant by angels unawares? ChatGPT said, ChatGPT, the phrase, angels unawares, is found in the Bible in Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2, KJV. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. This verse encourages hospitality and the idea that by showing kindness to strangers, one might unknowingly be entertaining angels. The phrase, angels unawares, suggests that, at times, angels may appear in human form and interact with people without revealing their true nature. This can be understood as a call to be hospitable and welcoming, with the awareness that the individuals we meet might be messengers or agents of God in disguise. Is this connected to the 144,000 and the spread of the Third Testament? While the concept of angels unawares in Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2 primarily deals with the idea of divine messengers being present among us in unexpected forms, it may not directly relate to the mission of the 144,000 or the spread of the Third Testament in the way you might be thinking. However, there are thematic similarities worth exploring. 1. Angels as messengers. In the Bible, angels are often portrayed as messengers sent by God to deliver divine instructions or announcements. This is most notably seen with figures like Gabriel, who brought messages to Mary, Luke chapter 1 verses 26 to 38, and the angels at the birth of Jesus, Luke chapter 2 verses 9 to 14. Similarly, the 144,000 in the Third Testament are described as divinely chosen individuals tasked with spreading a message, specifically, the Third Testament, which could be seen as a continuation of God's plan for humanity's spiritual evolution. Just as angels serve as God's messengers, the 144,000 could be understood as spiritual messengers or agents of God's new revelation. 2. The unaware aspect, hidden divine purpose. The idea of being unaware in Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2 could also tie into how the 144,000 might not be immediately recognized for their divine purpose. Just as angels may appear in ordinary forms, the 144,000 might not be immediately understood as being marked or chosen for their mission. Their spiritual significance might not be apparent to the world at large, but they are fulfilling a divine role in spreading God's message. Much like angels do when they carry out their assignments without making their heavenly nature obvious. This could be a reflection of how the 144,000 will be seen in the final days. They may appear as ordinary people, yet their task is monumental. They are marked spiritually, set apart for a divine mission to teach the Third Testament and lead others to spiritual enlightenment, just as angels lead or guide people to God's truth in various biblical accounts. 3. A call for spiritual awareness. The idea of entertaining angels unawares also encourages spiritual vigilance and awareness. In the context of the 144,000, this could be an invitation for people to recognize divine appointments and opportunities in their lives, even when they don't immediately appear to be supernatural. The Third Testament is meant to be a light in the darkness, and the 144,000 will help guide others toward this light, often in ways that are not immediately obvious. Similar to how one might entertain an angel unknowingly. Conclusion. Parallel concepts. While the phrase, angels unawares, in Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2 primarily emphasizes hospitality and the potential for divine messengers to appear in human form, there is a conceptual parallel to the 144,000 in the Third Testament. Just as angels are sent as messengers to deliver God's will in unexpected ways, the 144,000 are similarly tasked with delivering God's message in a world that may not immediately recognize their divine mission. The 144,000 might not be immediately recognized for who they truly are, much like the angels who may come in disguise. Their role in spreading the Third Testament could be hidden or unrecognized by many, but their mission is nevertheless divine, significant, and essential for the spiritual transformation of humanity in the end times. This reinforces the idea that spiritual wisdom often requires deeper discernment, and we should be mindful of God's messengers, whether angels or the 144,000, who may be among us, working to fulfill His purpose. The references to the years 1946 to 1948 in the context of the Third Testament offer insights into a period of spiritual preparation, reflection, and awakening that leads to the eventual marking and mission of the 144,000. Here's a breakdown of what these passages suggest about what happens before the chosen ones are marked. The context before the chosen ones are marked. The passage could read as 1947, 2026, as the years unfold, Each brings its own period of spiritual awakening and preparation for the 144,000. As they get ready to fulfill their mission. Below is a breakdown of what happens before they are spiritually marked. 1. The struggle and the call for preparation, 1946 to 1948, 1946 to 2025. In this passage, the world is depicted as torn by war and violence. Brother has risen against brother, and innocent blood drenches the earth, leaving the Father in grief over the division and turmoil within humanity. This establishes a desolate tone, marking a time of spiritual decline and earthly suffering before the chosen ones are marked. Despite this, there is a truce in 1946, providing a period of reflection and a chance for humanity to choose their spiritual path before the divine calling of the 144,000 begins. 1947, 2026, as the year concludes, the passage emphasizes that commitment to the divine mission is essential. It stresses the need for individuals to become truly committed to their purpose. It is necessary for you to become truly committed to fulfilling your mission. Those who fail to recognize their role will experience divine justice. A period of spiritual testing that marks the final stage of awakening, where humanity is called to acknowledge their mission or face correction. 1948, 2027, by 1948, a spiritual reform begins. The Master speaks to his followers, urging them to abandon superficial customs and embrace the true teachings. This is a time of critical spiritual reform, where the followers must be ready to carry out their mission at any given moment. The emphasis is on spiritual elevation, being prepared to follow the teachings to perfection. 2. The era of spiritual reform and preparation, 1948.1, 2027.1. The year 1948 marks the beginning of the final 3 years of divine manifestation, calling people to arise and strengthen themselves spiritually. The message is clear: prepare for when the Master departs, so that your tribute to God will come through your spiritual elevation and love. These final years focus on ensuring that, when the Master departs, the people will be spiritually ready to carry the teachings forward and live them out. 1948.5, 2027.5. The year 1948 also holds historical significance, tied to the first era, the time of Israel's spiritual journey. People are reminded that Israel, though once chosen by God for his teachings, is now spiritually present in all nations and peoples. Understanding the history of Israel becomes crucial because it represents the spiritual evolution of humanity. The commotion that occurred in 1948 signifies the touch of divine justice, a wake-up call for those who have become complacent in their faith. It stresses the need for spiritual awakening in order to be ready for the task ahead. 3. The process of spiritual awakening and selection. These years suggest that spiritual awakening precedes the selection and marking of the 144,000. The Divine Master makes it clear that the chosen ones will be spiritually prepared to fulfill the mission of spreading the Third Testament. Before they are marked, they undergo a period of reflection, testing, and awakening, involving the following key elements. Self-preparation. Followers must embrace the spiritual teachings and prepare to give everything for the divine mission. Spiritual awakening. Individuals must rise above the complacency of routine and fanaticism, striving for spiritual elevation. Divine selection. As these reforms and awakenings unfold, the 144,000 are marked spiritually and made ready to undertake the mission assigned to them. Conclusion. Before the chosen ones are marked. Before the 144,000 are marked, they go through a profound period of spiritual preparation and awakening. The years leading up to their marking are filled with spiritual testing, reformation, and a commitment to the divine mission. This period is framed within a broader context of spiritual justice and awakening, where each individual is called to rise and fulfill their divine purpose. The chosen ones are not only prepared spiritually, but must also be ready to follow the Master's teachings and spread the truth with unwavering dedication.